child. You know, if there is one thing that even in a counseling context makes counseling very effective, beginning and also to they'll say kimbia kwa nani mwalimu fulani akakusikiza na akakusaidia, si kweli? It happens. So, and that is why we to equip you with some of basic skills and techniques that you can be able to use and observe as you interact with the children. So when you're talking about counseling as a process, the first instance what happens when you initiate counseling is you first receive that child who needs that care and is able to share with you, and also you, as the person who is going to interact with that child, you are able to identify and assess what problem that child has come up with in that counseling context. So when you identify the second phase is problem assessment. What are those underlying issues the child is going through that they need that help? So another thing that you're going to do in that context is going to take history taking. So this is normal. This is the normal counseling session. You do history taking, explore some of those options available, and I'm going to dig deeper because I just want to set a base for us to understand when we're talking about counseling as a process, what that means. Then you build that rapport so that when you empathize with that child is able to feel safe in your hands. Then when you have identified those underlying issues and problems that the child is going through, then you're going to come up with a goal you want to achieve at the end of it. How are you going to help that child be able to re-identify themselves? How are you going to help that child to be able to process the presenting issue? How are you going to help that child to be able to walk through and say, I've gone through healing? And then what are some of those interventions? It could be in terms of the needs of that client. It could be in terms of where can that child get the help apart from the first interaction that they have had with the counselor or as you as a teacher. Then once that is done, you come and evaluate, has this been achieved? Then we say, the goal that we set in counseling and those underlying issues the child was going through, that has been achieved, and I'm going to refer that child to another place where they can be able to get the help they need as per the needs. So this is where I want us to spend some time to be able to understand in context wakati tunasema counseling tunamaanisha. So the first instance, when you're talking about contracting, this is the key of it all. Here, I'm going to dig deep again when we go into the counseling skills, but I want us to understand that contracting means your first interaction with this child. It might not in the official way we are doing counseling out there, but remember what we are doing is first aid counseling, right? So when you're doing the first aid counseling, you are not going to contract and have that child sign the contract with signing a normal counseling. But what you are doing is, this child has come, you receive the child, you'll be able to create that conducive environment and build rapport. When you're building rapport, here we say you need to be genuine with that client, you need to empathize, walk in put yourself in their shoe and understand what is this child going through. And at the end of it all, don't be judgmental, because at the end of it, what we want to do, si tuanza kuuliza mtoto ama mama akiwa pale ulikuwa wapi kifanyikia mtoto. Does that happen? Does it happen? Do we ask some of those questions sometimes? If that child hears that and they are here and they are there, it didn't happen because of their own doing. Someone has taken advantage. What are you doing to that child? Traumatizing and re-traumatizing them. So that is why we are saying, we'll dig deeper when we're talking about the core conditions. We talk more about what do we mean by genuineness, what do we mean by unconditional positive regard, when you go into the counseling skills, and what do we mean when we're talking about being empathetic with that child. And the other thing is taking history. Has this child been able to be exposed to such kind of abuse before? What is the home environment like? So that you get a context from them, how is this happening? And that is what happens in a normal counseling context. But I'm trying to bring it deeper. And now, this is the second phase of it, exploration. This is where we need you to equip you as a beacon teacher to be able to assess, to be able to understand the world of this child. What has this child gone through? What is the home environment looking like? What is, if this child leaves home, goes to school, and ended namna gani? What has this child been exposed to before? Is there a dysfunctional family? Is this child coming from a dysfunctional family that is even exposing them further to the abuse? And then once you do that, because what you're doing is you are creating that conducive environment for that child to be able to open up, share those issues they are going through. Then, once that child is able to have that relationship with that child, then you are creating that conducive environment for them to be able to open up. And the other thing is, once you understand the world of that client, then what you're doing is even observation as a counseling skill, even the tone that child speaks, you are able to pick it from that context because you are doing a lot of exploration and trying to understand what is the best way for me to get those children to get the help that they need. So in a nutshell, I've tried to break it down for me not to take you deeper into what counseling is, but for you to have an understanding of basic counseling, what does that look like, right? All right, any question? So tusiweke mpaka tumalize. So can someone who understands the difference between counseling and guidance and counseling? So wakati tunasema counseling, it's very exploratory because what we want to see is we want to explore what are the avenues, what are the best ways in which I can assist this child to be able to process what is going through. But in counseling, in guidance and counseling, what you're doing. Allow me to change my microphone. I feel there was a lot of echo. So the other thing I was saying, when you're talking about counseling, you are trying to explore what are the available options. But when this child sometimes interacts with them in school, for you it might be based on information giving because something has happened to that particular child. And here, the reason why I want us to understand the difference. And the reason why I want us to understand the difference between counseling and guidance and counseling is because most of the time you'll find yourself doing both. All right? Because at some point this child might not come. Are you going to explore with information you don't have? Sometimes these cases, sometimes they happen, but the parents don't want to come out and say this has happened. But out of those children who are courageous enough, they come and they report those cases, right? So that is why we say it might be exploratory because you want to explore the avenues and ways in which it's going to assist that child. But when you're providing that guidance, what is happening, you're using the information that you have and then to be able to pass out the advice or the best way that child is going to get assistance. And the other way is when you're talking about counseling, most of the time it's initiated by the client. It's the client who comes because they have a need. They want to see a counselor. But here now, this is where you also come in. That most of the time, it might be initiated by you as a people teacher because you know what this child is going through. You will that child, you can't sit and wait for that child to come because at the end of it, fear, they have also been people are very vulnerable. And when someone is very vulnerable, even having that the courage to come out and report in a funny moment. So, and at these other contexts, when you're talking about counseling, it's very personal, and there's a lot of confidentiality that needs to be taken into consideration. On the other hand, it's not that personal, it's more general because of the information. Unaweza kupata pale ofisi mwalimu mwingine anasema out of your shared confidentiality among the big teachers or even teachers, aseme kuna mtoto alishikwa na tutaanza msaidia huyu mtoto namna gani hawezi kupata usaidizi. It's based on general information. Then from there, so you can start from general information that has been shared with you for you to make it go down the train, for you to make it specific and find that child and see the best way you're going to assist them. So that is what I'm saying. For you, it's going to be both. That you're going to be providing maybe those basic counseling, but at the same time, you're going to do what? Guidance. Because what you're doing is, even these children are not in a position to give consent and say, I want counseling at this particular time, I want this and that. But you might be the one initiating because you have the best interest of what? Of that child. And when you're talking about counseling, it deals with, do we remember when I began, I said what counseling is about? And that is what I'm saying. When you're talking about counseling here now, it deals with feelings, it deals with emotions, it deals with what? Sorry? Exactly. Because when someone goes through a traumatic event or such an incident has an abuse of that particular child, you know what? That child is not going to be the same. And when my colleague Pamela comes in to talk about trauma, you'll understand that trauma that is not processed is always transparent. And if it's not transparent, then it is going to inwardly and outwardly affect that person who has been subjected to that trauma. And if that person does not get help that they need, it even gets worse. And that is how you find those people who have been highly traumatized, they sink into depression. They also sink into post-traumatic stress disorder and also other mental and psychological issues pop up. So that is why we say now, on the other hand, it is based on factual knowledge and information sharing, because sometimes you have interacted with these cases. These cases do happen. If one time you came across a case where someone was involved, for example, mtu wa bodaboda, ama hata pale Dr. Joan akisema alianza kuna mwalimu mmoja alishikwa. You have understood the process of how you've been able to handle before a case yenye mtoto amenakisiwa. Utakaa hapo simame because you now see jump into action and say there's a case that happened like this is how it was handled. Then how can we assist this particular child? That is why I'm saying, on the other end, you might end up being in a position to do a lot of guidance to see what are the available options and best ways to assist that particular child. Without further ado, let me just go to the next one to save us on time. And when we're talking about umuhimu wa kupeana ushauri kwa watoto ama kwa yule mtu yote, utakuwa na come across within the community that they need your help. When you're talking about importance of counseling, what does that look like? So counseling, it assists the client getting insight into the issues that they are going through. So then, once they get insight into that, they are able to make informed decisions. It assists the client to resolve those conflicting situations in their lives. It helps the clients to benefit. It helps reduce individual vulnerability. When that particular child has gone through that traumatic experience, they're very vulnerable at that particular stage. But you, as a person who is trying to stand in the gap and also assist them to walk through that, what you are doing then is to be able to reduce that vulnerability and be able to work with them. And also help them make those realistic choices. and even through their parents, their caregivers, for them to be able to come with them, provide that assistance they need to know and know what are the next steps when it comes to the best interest of that particular child. So then, counseling then helps that child walk from point A, where they were vulnerable, and be able to go through that journey of healing, that tomorrow you can even find that child sharing their stories and also being a source of hope to others. We have had some of those children coming out as champions or against defilement, or even someone, when that particular time they went through defilement, they went through counseling, and now they're done with school and they're able to also speak against those violations. Or even some of us went through some of those experiences or know someone who went through that experience. But counseling gives hope. Counseling helps them gain more insight about what they have gone through, and then they are able to make informed decisions and able to walk through that phase of healing. So there is something, when I began, I said counseling is a process and is built on a relationship between a client and a counselor. So when you're talking about counseling as a relationship, this is where you as a counselor or you as a big teacher who is working with that child, you build those healthy relationships that are going to help that child to be even comfortable, to be even in a position to share information, to be in a position that they are able to connect with you as a big teacher, or even, like I was saying, that some of those organizations that you have mapped, you as big teachers from Kilifi, from Malindi, you can be able to refer those clients to be able to access that counseling that they need. So what does that look like? So I'm not talking about relationship ile nitasema niko na relationship yule mtoto nilimwona jana akitembea na mtu kijana alikuwa anakaa. Si hizi zinafanyika? Sisi zingine hata nasikia wale wenye wamekuwa na uchuja sana ni wa motorbike. Utapota. Ndio wanashinda na hao watoto. You see now the moment these children because of also the poverty level, sometimes you also empower them in terms of making decisions. Do you do that? Do you empower them? That is very warm, and also because you also want to, because you also and have the best interest of those children, then you are able to help them walk through that. So you are present. Because presence is not just being physical, but also being able to connect with them psychologically, and also that safe space for those children to be able to share and also open up to you.
I want to make a comment about the therapeutic alliance that Wilfred is talking about because of a question that I asked in the forum.
So, what does it mean? Are we on the same page?
Yeah.
Na watoto alafu tusikie.
Because there's already a bond that the teacher has in Beacon Teachers Africa here called Semawazi Forum. And this Semawazi Forum is meant to help the kid gain the courage to speak out about issues, about anything that they might be going through. But thank you also for pointing out about the Kajoto. Najua Kajoto inaweza.
Thank you so much. Because what you're doing is you come in as a facilitator and also be able to support those children. So I know already you're doing that, but what we're saying is continue doing that and do it in a way that creates hope, in a way that makes you empathize with those children, and also be able to communicate effectively and also come up with that warmth those children need. Sometimes they also don't have that mother or father figure at home, but you also come to stand in the gap and also create that some sort of hope in the context of as a professional. Sasa zingine mtu anaweza sema nataka kukuja kukaa kwako and some at that particular time that child is very vulnerable, so someone can easily take advantage. Na tunasema kwamba most of the time abuse happens to the children because of someone they trust most. Is that true? Is it true? So that is why we're saying remain within that professional boundary of professionalism as you create that therapeutic relationship and warmth and empathy, all right? I want us to do an exercise, but because of time, turn to someone who is seated next to you and ask yourself, how is the professional counseling relationship or your interaction with children different from other relationships? And at least in your own pairs of two, just in a minute, talk against those don'ts and do's that happen in those other relationships and be able to be focused now when we're talking about counseling relationships. What do you think that will look like as far as we have interacted so far? I'm telling you, the next 1 minute, so at least we'll have two people be able to speak about that. Are the conversations becoming interesting? Are they?
Ile ya kwanza, it's professional,
Naona wale wenye hawaongei.
it's supportive, it's not sexual, it's not romantic, because you know that several relationships. It's
the other various kinds of relationships for mambo mengi.
And again, here one is a facilitator, one is a client. A counselor is a relationship between a counselor and a client. So I think that one is enough.
Can you come back now? Can you come back? Order.
How is it similar?
So let me ask, at least one or two people.
How is it similar?
What difference do you find from the normal relationship that you interact with, or you are in, or you have experienced, that makes it different when we are talking about therapeutic relationship, or you as the professional engagement you have with that child who needs support? Did you come up? Did you get something? At least let me hear from you. Teachers, you are not courageous enough to speak for.
Hello.
Hello.
The difference will be the same. The explanation will be different. For example, in both, they have set goals. There's a goal as to why. There's something that triggers, and there's a goal that you want to reach at the end of the day. But for counseling, at least the set goal is clear that you want to help the child out of the client out of the issue. Then they are both issue-based, and then what are the issues again? In the other one, the issue is different, but here the issue is what is at hand that you want to bring out of the child. So we've discussed the four, but I'll give to give room for the rest.
Okay, for me, counseling is different from other relationships because counseling is more of professional. It's based on trust and also there should be compassion in the counseling. Other than that,
that is what I wanted to hear, especially the aspect, it's very different. It is not the same. What you have is a professional engagement. Number two, it's very confidential because counseling without confidential, you can be sued for exposing or sharing someone's information without their consent, unless, and I'll tell you some of those at least 3 or 4 avenues where confidentiality can be broken, all right? So in that context then, I want us to look into, and this is tied to what we just discussed, characteristics of an ideal counseling relationship. That is one that is based on proximity, that you need to be present and also be close to that particular client or that particular child that is in need of that support that you extending to them.
Excuse me, please. Sorry. You have said something very important about confidentiality. And many of the challenges that we're having in schools are related to confidentiality. When it comes to the issue of sexual violence, you know just how deep that is. But then many of the teachers are unable to keep that information in their hearts, their minds. They verbalize too much. And as a result, then children sort of freak out from reporting or from confiding. And so I just like that emphasis.
Yeah, and towards the end of this particular presentation, I'm going to dig deeper. And then of it is also out of best practices as professionals, that wakati mtoto amekuja kwako akakuelezea na labda uko na huyo mtoto pale, unasema uko na yeye na unapigiwa simu unasema hata huyo tena ameshikwa. Now at that particular time you also interact with a victim or a survivor of the same violence. What are you doing to that particular child? That even has also shared what has happened to me, kila mtu atakuwa anafanya nini anapewa. So it's also out of best practices of maintaining confidence of the cases we interact with, unless it's within shared confidentiality. Can you hold on? I'll come back. Just write it somewhere so that towards the end of my presentation, I'm going to talk deeper about confidentiality, all right? Being harassed. And that's on a right note. So that is why we say proximity ni muhimu sana, that even as you interact with that particular child, you must be objective, you must be present, you must be relevant with the discussions or the engagements you're having with that particular child, because at the end of it all, what is needed is the connection to maintain both physical and the emotional distance, so that at the end of it, even as you do that, how is that child able to connect with you? How is that child being able to feel safe in your hands? So that is one of the characteristics of an ideal relationship. And also communication is very key. You as people teacher, or you as person who is doing the first aid to that particular child, are you able to communicate effectively? And this, when you're talking about communication, it's not just verbal, but also non-verbal. Are you communicating with that particular child? Are you able to express yourself so that you can also help that child to be able to be vulnerable in your hands, so that they can also be able to express themselves and just narrate what has happened to them? And also, by virtue of that we are saying, the relationship we are talking about is therapeutic alliance, or that professional engagement you're going to have with that particular child. Leave it at professional level. Don't overstep. And that is why when we're talking about, we will talk about the ethical considerations, having the best interest of that child, and also not taking advantage of those children that you come across with. And that even as you do that, the therapeutic and engage with them is client-centered. Is not your own. Is not your own what? Exactly. But you are not going there and say, sasa nimepata nafasi ya kukua huyu mtoto ninaona And sometimes back, a very senior judge made a very bad comment that really, as protectors of children, wasn't very interesting. That those children, when they are born to that particular age, according to our culture, they are right. Have you heard that particular statement coming from someone?
Yes.
Right, you did? So just imagine, that is why we ever say that relationship between those children and you, or as they are, and also they are seeing you as role models and also someone that is standing in the gap. Let it be client-centered, that you stepping in the gap to assist them to be able to process what they are going through. And also as you do that, remain empathetic, all right? Put yourself in their shoes to be able to find the best solution and also focus on their well-being. So some of the good qualities of a good counselor, and this is where I say, at any given time when I see a counselor, see yourself as a beacon teacher, a good communicator, which I've already spoken into, that you are able to express yourself and also help that child to be able to express themselves effectively, and that you're going to be very empathetic, because and this is something that we ever says, and at any given time you can never talk about counseling without speaking about empathy. That you're going to put yourself in the shoes of those children and work with them for purposes of also healing. And that and this is at the core of counseling, that rapport building. Because even in me today, I've not interacted with someone a teacher from maybe Kilifi. I come here, we have a conversation. There's some information I want to open to that particular person, both because we have not created that rapport to be able to interact with them. With that particular teacher, is that true? Is that true? The way they are without judging them. And the other is being flexible. Because at some point we also define has been the ability to the way you respond to it. And say, because most of the time those children are emotionally, particularly from traumatic experience or event, they get affected. And that is why we say, you as the first aid response, are you flexible enough to be able to help that child, or to help that child to those needs to have at that particular time? So that is why we say, at least be flexible. Has come, and this child that they need someone to at least show up for their utasema ngoja mpaka ile siku inapatikana. Sometimes you can be flexible, and when we're talking about being flexible, it's not just time, but also being flexible in terms of also being present. Help them. The other one is self-awareness. Self-aware that even Thank you so much. And the other one is being culturally sensitive, and so that you know when you're interacting with culture does affect. Sorry. And sometimes, culturally we need to be very sensitive. Inaweza fika hapa, you find that you as a counselor, mwingine ni Muislamu, mwingine ni Mkristo. afika aseme mimi sikuwa mtoto ama mimi sioni na huyu upande mwingine. But are you sensitive enough also just to have that in mind, that even as we interact with that child or even the caregivers, that you're also putting those into consideration. Now, wengine watasema my religion does not allow me to see a Christian counselor. How do you able to get that? So being culturally sensitive and also being, even in terms of communication. Labda wengine utafika huko wakwambie, tukiwa kwa hii mkutano, mama aongee mimi ndio mzee wa boma wa kufanya nini? Mzee wa boma wa kufanya nini? Wa kuongea. Na saa zingine, some of these cultures, as I was saying earlier, someone was making a very uncomfortable comment that those children are ripe. Some cultures, they think that that is normal, but we do have laws that protect those children, right? Are you able to sensitively even come stand in the gap and pass the same information? So when you are talking about being sensitive, that you are able to relate and also be able and being able to see what is the best interest of that particular child, having in consideration in terms of their tribe, their race, and also religion. And some of those ones, they feel like, sisi tulikuwa tunasema, Dr. John alikuwa anasema, kidogo tulegeze kamba tutoke kwa commercial aspect pia, kuna cases za defilement zafanyika, sio? So some feel that it's normal for those children to do that as a source of income. But is that true? Is that true? Because each child has a right to enjoy their childhood. But you as a counselor then, or you as a beacon teacher, how do you stand in the gap? So that is why we're saying, I don't want to dig deeper into that, because we have talked about the difference between counseling and guidance and counseling. But on a nutshell, as a counselor, you're going to do what we call co-cognition to facilitate healing. When we're talking about co-cognition, we are saying we want you to be non-judgmental. We want you to be able to create that empathetic environment for you to enable that child to be able to open up and speak, and also that you're going to be do what we call unconditional positive, that you're not going to judge that particular child, you're going to accept the way they are, and also at the same time as you do that, you remain genuine, so that once you do that, you're going to create that conducive environment for that child to be able to open up. But on the other hand, that child or that client who comes to you for help, they need to remain disciplined, committed, and also cooperate, because healing happens in a conducive environment that child is able to process what they have gone through. And the only way to do that is for them to be present, for them to be able to be committed to the healing journey. So at the end of it, we say, when we came up during the exploration phase of counseling, these are the goals, these are the problems we identified, and this is the journey we are going to walk, at least for counseling to achieve its purpose, and say, tumetembea hii safari, na ile wakati tulisema huyu mtoto aweze kupata usaidizi, ilikuwa ni usaidizi gani? Aende kesi, alipoti, kesi iende kotini, ama huyu mtoto aweze kwenda through counseling, ndio kusudi ile kitu ilimfanyikia aweze kujieleza, aweze kuprocess, so that even as we follow up on the case, this child is psychologically stable, and they are no longer, sometimes there are different symptoms of trauma. That child, sometimes you find them traumatized, they are withdrawn, they are experiencing nightmares, but how are you going to help that child to be able to open up? So that is why I'm saying they also need to, they have a role to play to be able to be committed during that healing phase. But without further ado, let me just rush through because of time. Because I know we had talked about that when we were talking about guidance and counseling. All right? I want us to practically go deeper now and talk about, when we're talking about counseling skills, how does that look like? And I know I was being asked, do we proceed? You give me 10 minutes to proceed, or we take a break and then I come finish in 20 minutes. Sorry? Proceed. Thank you so much for protecting me. So, the first one I want to talk about is co-condition. And this cannot be emphasized enough. The reason why this is very critical is because this is the basis of counseling. And one of the theories of therapeutic approaches in counseling, we call person-centered approach, says that core conditions are the basis of setting up counseling for that child, for that client who comes for help, to be able to open up. Because what you're doing is then, this is where the therapeutic alliances are built up. Because what first you're doing is first you are able to empathize. Put yourself in the shoes of that particular child. And I wish you are going to do practically here, but time does not allow, that you're going to put yourself in the shoes of that particular child. That even the way you communicate, that even the way you embrace that child, that even the way you welcome that child to that room, or that office which has been set aside for guidance and counseling, that child feels very comfortable, that child feels there's someone who has the best interest for them, that child is able to even lighten up. Because of what? Because you as a counselor or you as a teacher, you are being empathetic enough to that particular child. You're trying to stand in the gap and understand them when someone else is not doing what? Understanding them. So that is the first one. The second one, which we call unconditional positive regard, is that you remain genuine and care for the clients and does not evaluate or judge them in any way. That you put into consideration their feelings, you put into consideration their emotions, and also their thoughts. Because most of the time when someone has gone through a very traumatic experience, what happens is that what we call irrational beliefs pop in, or irrational thoughts. Because at that particular time, that person is not psychologically what? Sound. And because of the trauma they have been subjected to, they need someone to stand in the gap, and that is why we're saying we want you to maintain that professional relationship between the clients that you see. And in this case, you stand in the gap and you wear different shoes as someone who is having to provide guidance. Some will see you as their role model, some will see you as their father figure, and some will see you as their mother figure. So then how does that make that child to be able to open up and say, ilinifanyika hivi na hivi? And I like what Dr. Joanna said, that when someone tried to take advantage of a child, they didn't take it lightly. That child was able to speak, because that child perhaps knows this is not right for me. And that child perhaps has been empowered well. But what about that child who comes from here? They don't know anything. So when you speak, when you come into that gap and be able to, unajua kuna wengine mtoto ataenda kuripoti aseme na kwa nini ulimwacha akafanya hivyo, si ndio? Aanze kukemea mtoto. But what does that do to that particular child? You even end up re-traumatizing them, which is again doing what? Which is doing what? Making them to be more vulnerable. So the other thing is being authentic, being real. As you interact with that child, say it as it is, with the best interest of that child, that even as you interact with them, you are very trustworthy, you are very reliable to that child, and you are able to embrace that therapeutic alliance we are talking about. The other very key counseling skill is active listening. This one I felt like I need to practically demonstrate, but because of time, I don't know how we're going to do that, but just, let me allow Madam Pamela to quickly be able to do that. But even as she does that, Callisto, I want to request you to come here. You harassed me, so this is my time to request you. Kindly, Callisto. Callisto, and you're putting a Wi-Fi password, so you know it's going to take away my participants. You see what is happening online. Kindly don't put the password. So I want Pamela to clearly demonstrate when you're talking about, let me explain this and then Pamela will be able to demonstrate for us. When you're talking about active listening, that the counselor or you as a teacher, you're able to pay attention actively. Let me say again, versus the one actively pay attention to both verbal and non-verbal communication, not just listening, not just hearing the words the client is talking about, but how the words are being said, what tone of voice is being used, what words are being used to describe the experience, what body language the person is displaying, the facial expressions show, what facial expressions show at that particular time when you interact with that child, what gestures indicate the flow of words and the hesitations. And when you're talking about this, and you'll see Pamela demonstrate something we call sonar, that you're going to sit squarely as you listen to that particular child. Number two is that you're going to lean towards that particular child so that you follow the conversation. Sometimes you'll find yourself nodding or validating what that child is saying as a way of connection. And the other one is that you're going to maintain the eye contact. And lastly, that you're going to remain relatively relaxed. The reason you're doing this, you also want to put into action your observation skills as a teacher that you've learned. And now we are equipping you with such kind of skills as actively listening to that particular client. And here you are putting into practice the verbal and non-verbal cues so that you are able to connect with that particular child. Over to you, Pamela.
Thank you, Wilfred. So we are talking about communicating to the child that you are actively listening and you're physically attending to them. Why? Because the first language of children is non-verbal communication. They pick non-verbal communication a lot faster, a lot quicker. It makes more sense to them than verbal communication. So how you behave is very critical of the interpretation that that child is going to make. We want you to come. You will not be able to observe the non-verbal because you're too close, isn't it?
Yes.
Anything else?
Because
Yes.
change.
Anyone who walks in might judge you in terms of what are you doing. So the distance between you and that child is very, very important. Let it not be too far, but also let it not be too near to intimidate the child. But what we are saying, there should be no barrier between you and the child. So don't talk to the child while you're behind the desk. Then when we talk about having an open posture, don't talk to the child when you are like this, or you are like this, and you're swinging in your seat. You might be communicating to that child that they are wasting your time. And they will read your nonverbal and close up, and they will not open up. So an open posture is where your feet are not crossed, they are right on the ground, and your hands are also open. And that communicates that I'm here for you. I'm ready to listen to you. Go ahead and open up in terms of what it is that you want to let me know. Then maintain eye contact. Don't stare. There's a difference, people. Staring is like, you know, like you're literally staring at the child. What does that do to them?
Scares them away.
Yes, they'll be scared to even open up. So maintaining eye contact means it communicates that I'm listening to you. I'm not looking at my watch. I'm not on my phone. Have you ever talked to someone and they are texting on the phone? Yeah. How do you feel? You feel they are not listening to you, isn't it? Yeah, or they are talking to someone else. Oh, ngoja kidogo, naja. And then all unasema, trail of thought has already gone out of the window. Yeah, so you really need to be aware of your non-verbal communication to that child, because only then can you actually help them to be able to open up. So sit upright, okay? Have an open posture. We have talked about what an open posture is. Lean forward appropriately. appropriately. Don't lean too close to the child. Okay? Again, because you might intimidate them. For ladies, sometimes you are also wearing very long-necked blouses. If you lean inappropriately,
It causes global warming.
so you know what happens? If you are wearing a very long-necked blouse and you're
And therefore
leaning,
climate change.
so you see, when we say lean forward, we say lean forward appropriately. What am I doing when I'm leaning forward? I'm just communicating.
Do you hear climate change?
I am hearing you. I am listening to you. I am here for you. That's the communication we want you to have for that particular child. You have no idea what a difference it makes. It makes a whole lot of a difference when that child can actually see that you are listening to them. You're giving them attention. Maybe at home they have told somebody else that they have not given them attention. And then relax. If you are relaxed, you help the child to also relax. If you are anxious, the child will also be anxious. As a beacon, you need to have learned crisis management, isn't it? So that they tell you something and you're like, oh, mambo gani haya sasa jamani? Mambo gani haya? What are you doing to that child? If I behave that way, how will you I want my child to tell me how he feels if I behave that way as a beacon teacher.
As a child, I'll automatically shut down and even now stop narrating my story.
Yeah, because you are like, wow, I think my situation is bad. It was. Hadi mwalimu ameshtuka hivyo. Hii yangu hata hajaisikia tena. So you need to be contained. You need to be calm. You need to be relaxed so that you communicate the same. You mirror. We call it mirroring. You're able to mirror the same to the child, and the child will be able to open up and talk to you. The other thing is avoid touch.
Oh.
Okay? Avoid touch. I know sometimes you just feel like, umemsikilia huyo mtoto huruma kabisa, you just feel like, let me just hug this child. Now, sometimes that touch might be a trigger. So you want to avoid it unless the child themselves, want a hug and they are asking for it. You want to avoid that. Touch is in such a situation. Touch is very dicey. You don't want to be having your hand all over the child. Maintain those boundaries because you don't know the method that was used by the perpetrator to abuse them. So you don't want to be a trigger to what happened to them. So that's what Wilfred is talking about.
Thank you so much. And now you see, when we said sit down and discuss the difference between the normal relationships that we interact with, and when you're talking about the therapeutic alliance, which is professional in nature, what the difference it makes, right? But that even as that context, as you actively listen to that particular child, what we have said is at all times remain observant, have your observation cues alert all the time, and also be present to that particular child. Maybe just to add that even as that happens, don't direct that child where to sit. Get in and just tell that child sit where you feel comfortable in any of those seats that have been presented there. So that makes that child also to be more comfortable in your hands and that they are going to be able to share. So we've talked about, and what Pamela has said, she has demonstrated, that also makes you be able to sympathize with that child and make that child to have a lot of bargaining to do and ask themselves why it only happened to me, it could have been someone else. So learning to empathize and work with them each step, that even as you nod and also be present with them, that you are working and able to understand what they are narrating to you. Unajua inaweza fika wakati unaanza sasa, have you been in a meeting or in a session na wakati unaongea na mtoto anakuongelesha ama mtu yote. Ukifika sasa ile umefika katikati unaweza by the way ulikuwa unasema nini? And you are present. And you are present. And unaongea by the way ulikuwa unasema nini? You are present physically but you are psychologically driven away. So take it that the first skills that we have equipped you with is active listening. Number 2, you've talked about 4 conditions, which entails what? Empathy and conditioned positive regard. And the third one is willingness. At least I know the participants who are following up with me. So the other one I want to talk about, I want me to leave you with those ones that you can be able to practically practice and also be able to experience the same as you interact with the children. So observation. That even as you interact with that child and you are actively present, you're able to pick the body language of that particular child. Unajua unaweza kana mtoto namwongelesha hapo anaangalia tu chini hataki hata kukuangalia. What message does that send to you? Maybe this child how do we call it? That child has gone through a lot, and also in terms of engagement. Maybe it also is a trigger for them, or they have come to a situation that they have found themselves in low self-esteem, and they don't even want to look at you. And the other one is the facial expressions of that particular child when you interact with them. Mtoto, do you even want to mention a particular name or even a place? It could even somewhere where they are walking to school that is always a trigger. And even as you mention about that particular place, hata labda you will be innocently speaking about ilifanyikia ulikuwa unajua hapa na hapa na mtoto na kumbe hapo ndio ilifanyika, so it becomes a trigger. So even as the facial expressions of that child, when you mention something that gets that child anapata hata goosebumps, what message is that sending to that particular child? So that is why I'm saying for us to be able to observe and have our observation cues alert all the time. And sometimes silence is also a very good technique that you can use in terms of engaging with that particular child. You might end up unanyamaza tu unasikiza huyo mtoto, or even as they cry, as they get emotional, just let them be. Just trying to speak some encouraging words to them and let them experience that moment for them to be able to relive that particular moment, and then they are able now to, that it could be the beginning point of healing. That you let them emotionally dive into what had happened, you let them relive that particular time, so that even as now they begin to share without interrupting them. Kama mtoto amesema amenyamaza, but you encouraging that they're getting emotional. For you, you're observing that this is something that you really need to support that particular child. So once you do that, and then now you can begin to have a conversation. Hata mtoto akuje tu aanze kulia, just let that child be able to process as you say some encouraging word to them, and then after that, be patient with them and be able to accommodate them. Sometimes that is what it takes for that child to be able to get to a point that they are going to open up and share. Before it begins, that is why we are saying 4 conditions are very critical when it comes to counseling. The other one I want to talk about is probing. Probing is very key. That even as you are in a counseling setup, as that child shares, aseme ilikuwa ni siku ikafanyika, ilifanyika wapi, like you probe further to get the information that you need, so that at the end of which what you are doing is for that to embrace self-expression from that child, and also come up with follow-up questions for that child to be able to open up and speak. The other one I want to quickly dive into is clarification. That even as this child shares their thoughts, their feelings and their emotions on what exactly transpired, that even things that you don't assume anything, that you're going to make a follow-up questions for you to be able to get those clarifications. Kama unauliza mtoto, nilisikia ulieleza hivi na hivi, ndio mtoto aweza kufanya clarifications. Kama wewe ndio ulisikia ulifanya nini, haukuelewa vile alisema, rather than you assuming hivi ndio mtoto amesema, na ukitoka hapo you assuming your own things, but at the end of which you know, each critical information, hata kama mtoto atairusha hapa na pale, it's very key, especially when it comes to exploring the best options to assist that particular child. So it's always good for you to be able to make those clarifications, and where you feel like the information is not clear, ask that child to restate, maybe with a follow-up question, so that you are able to understand mtoto anakuelezea nini. And sometimes, because these children have also been threatened by those perpetrators. Si kidogo saa zingine threatened wasiseme, sio? Na unaona ukiongelesha huyo mtoto in that counseling setup, pale vile Pamela amewaelezea, unaona mtoto anaenda hivi. Sometimes because you observe na ukaona, and you're actively following up with this child, unaona kuna kitu anadanganya, then sometimes you might need to confront them with the facts, so that child can be able kujue haswa ni nini ilifanyika, na labda amekuwa threatened, because what you are doing is still unaenda to confront with the purposes of why it happened, but the purposes with facts and information, so that you know how best to assist that particular child ndio aweze kusaidika. Sawa. So clarification, confrontation, and the last one, because now Masai imeenda, self-disclosure inakwanga muhimu sana. Maybe you are interacting with that child, and also you are a survivor or a victim of someone had also tried to do the same to you. But you tell you what you're trying to do is creating hope with that child and telling them this is not the end of life. I've gone through this, I picked the pieces, here I am. I've seen other guys or other boys who have gone through the same, but with the right support, support, they have been able to re-emerge stronger. They have been able to pick up the pieces, and they are stronger than ever. Hata labda kama unaona kuna mtoto mwingine amemaliza na is doing well, ama ameenda hata shule vizuri, ama amemaliza ameenda university, encourage that child to be able. Tuko na survivors wengi wa defilement. Tuko na survivors wengi wa gender-based violence. So encourage that child, and if you yourself you've gone through those experiences, encourage that child to be able to come out strongly, so that they can also be able to pick up the pieces and not give up with life. The last one I want to talk about is problem management skills. I know, but Pamela, you will talk deeper when they're going to talk about case management and trauma, right, Pamela? I know there is that part of it, but when you're talking about problem management, is the ability for the counselor to be able to help the client identify and make changes to negative thoughts, patterns, and other harmful behaviors that might be contributing to their underlying issues that they are going through. So when you do this, you identify the problem. How do you do that? You identify the problem at hand, you find the problem in a helpful way, and understand the problem that is at hand in a deeper way. Then you set up those goals to address the problem at hand, generating alternative creative solutions to that problem, choosing the best course of action, and helping the client to implement those choices they have made in that counseling context. And that is why we are saying counseling is a process. In closing, so this is why we are saying confidentiality is very key. And confidentiality is because you want whatever information the client shares with you, you are not going to disclose it with just anyone else without the consent of the client. And at this particular time, you see mtoto ni mtoto mdogo, unaanza kusema by default amenipatia nikiongelelea maneno yake sababu hana namna ya kuniambia niongee nisiongee, so I can be able to speak anything pale penye nitakuwa. You've seen some of those teachers or some people who have interaction with the children, anasema mtoto fulani ilifanyika hivi na hivi. But what are you doing to that particular child? So that is why we are saying, as professionals who have been empowered as educators, what you need to do is to make the information you share with the, you share with that particular child, or the information you get from that particular child, let it remain confidential, and don't disclose or give that information to third parties that are not supposed to even to hear that information, unless it's within shared confidentiality among professionals, or where you want to refer that particular child to go and get help. And that is why we are saying then that even the information that has been typed, or even the records, put those records in a way that is not everybody who is going to do what? Access that information. So that also goes into verbally, and let the documents that are available, let that information remain confidential. So the avenues or areas where confidentiality can be broken, sometimes you go to court, and this case has gone to court, and then the court says we want to allow this child to go through counseling for some time before they can come to court and testify. And when that happens, at some point you hear the court says this case has come to a conclusion and we need to do an impact statement because this child went through counseling. And within that counseling setup, a counselor can present a report or a case officer to say what that child went through and how that defilement or that violence impacted that child. Then that information can be used for purposes of making an informed decision. Or you've seen children who have been sent away from school na wameenda nyumbani na wamefukuzwa nyumbani. Wamefukuzwa nyumbani na wakati wamefukuzwa naambia ende uone counselor na report iletwe hapa. Sindio? So then confidentiality can be broken, or when instances where that child is becoming suicidal, then you might need to disclose that information, or at a time when that particular child is becoming suicidal now, causing self-harm to themselves. So those are some of the instances where confidentiality can be broken. Let me stop there, but even as I stop, so have this in mind, the ethical principles of counseling. One, beneficence, which means that you're going to promote the client's best interest and work people without causing any sort of harm. This involves sexual, commercial, or financial, that is, or any form of exploitation. The other one is that you're going to remain unjudgmental, and that the other one, you're going to a commitment to avoiding harm to the plant, which I've talked about. And then, so let me stop at that particular time because I've already eaten into the other presenters' time and also our teacher. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Ms. Socho. And let's give Ms. Socho a round of applause as they sit down. And then if you have any questions for Ms. Socho, kindly shoot them before he sits, and then we shall proceed. Swali?
You've spoken about confidentiality. Up to which level, as a people teacher, are you to keep the information confidential? You're supposed to report. Some are not head teachers. They're not in the position of decision making in school. And here is a student who has reported something to you, and it has grown to a level where you cannot make a decision on that student. What do you do? And maybe your head is somebody, if you tell her that information, it will get to everyone.
Let me say this, that this is the information that you got and something has happened to a particular child. When that child has reported to you, that child has not shared some crucial information automatically to that. But what you need to do is that child, what is the best interest of that particular child? Is for that child to get help at that particular time, right? So what is the immediate channel of that child going to get help from? There is the person who is in charge of that in the school, right? And who happens to be the headmaster, who is the dean. The manager, in short, in a nutshell, the teacher was conducted the abuse, right? If it's a teacher, right? So then you report that, and if you don't get help, then the next level of reporting goes to where? The TSC, right? But now, when it's this is the thing that you need to get. When you're talking about confidentiality, is information that has been shared in a counseling context. And because you also want to refer that child somewhere else to go and get the help that they need. So this is when, and that is why I say confidentiality can also be broken within shared professional context. Even we as counselors, we have something that we call counseling supervision. That if there are those clients who have gone through some challenging, if a therapist is seeing a client that they feel like they are challenging to them and they feel like they need to get help from others, they will come and say, I was seeing a client without mentioning the name, and this is what the issues at hand are, or these are the challenges I'm facing. How can you advise me to get help? And what could be the best interest of this child at this particular time or this particular person? What could be the next steps for me to be able to help? Then you say, do this and this. So then when you're having a counseling, when you are having counseling with that particular client, then you are able to explore all those avenues that have been shared with you. Maybe it's another therapist who was experiencing the same, and that is how they handle. So you explore all those avenues. But here is the thing then again. When I'm talking about now you getting help, a case has been reported. And you see, it's not the information that the child has shared in a counseling center. Even me today, if I see someone abusing a child, will I keep quiet? That is not breaking confidentiality. You're going to speak up or even encourage that particular person, that child, and they're being behaving. This is where you can go and get help, go report to a particular police station or go to hospital, procure the evidence that is needed, atibiwe kwanza, ndio kama ni magonjwa hasipate at that particular time. So we are saying, do not fear to report because you are feeling that you're going to break confidentiality. The confidentiality we are saying, if a client shares with you, how do you remain with that information for crucial purposes to help that person, that child go through the healing journey, not the information that is the clarification home?
Yes, but what if the child tells you, don't tell so and so, and that person is the boss?
Is the boss in a school, for example, now.
And it gets to a point where it involves medical attention. It involves this child leaving the institution to go seek because you cannot help at the lower level.
As TSC, do you have guidelines about children abuse? Let me allow Dr. Johan to speak to that.
Subordination.
Sorry, just allow me to stand for a moment. That's a very important question that she has asked because it's what many of the big teachers are going through.
True.
Now, I did mention earlier on that there's a difference between the law and the implementation of it. TSC has policies in place, and I'm not here to talk for TSC, but those laws, those regulations, the policies, they're implemented by people. And I did mention earlier on that the fact that I'm sitting there in an office implementing a policy doesn't mean I'm necessarily cooked into that policy. It does not mean that I'm totally supportive of that policy. Why? Because if I am a defiler, for instance, and I'm in charge of an institution, and there are policies that I'm supposed to be implementing, when a case of defilement is brought to me, are we not in the same space? And I can latch back on that case that I was talking about, where the head teacher was an abuser. And there was a teacher there who was sodomizing children for 30 years in the same school. The head teacher was abusing girls. Now, if you're in that situation and you have to report, who will you report to? You report to the same head teacher. So the teachers in that school said to me, we couldn't report because the head teacher is having affairs with the girls. This teacher has been sodomizing kids here for 30 years, and some of the teachers have been there for over 15 years. So to cut the long story short, that is why Beacon Teachers Africa exists. When you find yourself in that situation, you just report to me. And then I work with some external parties so that we rescue the case. We deal with the case without you being seen as the one that is, nyinyi ndio mnapatia shule jina mbaya. You see, that is one of the challenges we're having. That you've been seen to be maligning the school. Even some board members don't support that. They don't want the cases reported. So feel free. That is why we have also the toll-free line 116. But then I've always said, be wise as the serpent. Be wise, because you don't want to end your game before it starts. You don't want to start protecting a child and then expose yourself in a manner that you end up also losing. We've had situations where teachers who reported even ended up being dismissed. The same count that you expected somebody else to be charged with is what you're charged with. Unasemekana hata ni wewe ulikuwa una define watoto nini. All that information, jina inatolewa hiyo uko juu inaweka yako, and then you end up being dismissed. I remember bringing back to the payroll a teacher had been dismissed, an innocent teacher. For 6 good years, he was without job. So these are realities. Please be wise. And yeah, of course, these conversations can go on, and I think it is good for us to keep talking. Wherever you find yourself, if you're unable to move, please get in touch, and we shall do something. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
That is why we
Dr.
are saying the best interest of children always comes at in a handy in trying to report those cases. You don't have to keep quiet because you feel like at that particular time you will make someone feel uncomfortable. But what is the best interest of the child? Yeah. So don't keep quiet. Speak up against the violence against. Now we proceed.
Because of time constraints, we'll pause for the questions for now, and we'll later revisit the Q&A session later towards the end of this training activity. So at this point in time, I'll recognize the presence of Deputy TSC County Commissioner for Pasca County, Madam Karen Acheng, who is amongst us. You can just rise up and wave to the crowd. Thank you. And then I have issues with the registration. If you've not been registered, kindly reach out to me. And then number 2, if you have if your name tag is wrongly spelled, also reach out to me so that we get your correct names, so that when we'll be printing out the certificate that is after this activity, you get the correct names in your certificates. The washrooms are on the right, that is after you exit the door, and tea is ready out. We have the left wing and the right wing. So we want you to move with speed, get tea, and be back in the next 15 minutes if possible. With that said and done,